Thanks for being here. It is also such a pleasure for me to be here. The formal part of my talk takes just about a half an hour, and the idea is that then after that comes the fun part, where we step back and allow the session to go where it needs to go. If that's dialogue and questions, great, and if not, I have never had a lack for words, and so I will just embellish on the things that I have been talking about. As I was growing into adulthood, like so many other young men, I dated. My father was in the U.S. Foreign Service, and I grew up living in other cultures. And for a time, I dated a young woman from Belgium whose native language was French. We seemed to get along well and spent much of our time together comparing national traits and habits. She was an excellent cook and loved to make meals in the French tradition, which I did not mind at all. One time she made me the quintessential classic French dish, coq au vin. This is a delicious affair in which you pour an entire bottle of red wine over a chicken, add a few vegetables, some all-important herbs and spices, and bake it. The wine turns into a rich, melt-in-your-mouth sauce. The chicken has been tenderized by the alcohol, and the whole thing, when prepared by a skillful cook, which she was, can taste out of this world. On the evening of our meal, the anticipation was great, the ambiance in the decorated and dimly lit room was romantic, and expectations were high. I remember, as I began to taste and savor this meal, that the sauce was simply exquisite. But when I tried to cut into the meat, it was so tough, it was unpalatable. My Belgian friend was horrified and apologetic. I was embarrassed because I had taken her to buy the chicken at the same grocery store where I had bought my food without problems for years. And the whole evening, so promising, turned into culinary disappointment. Had either of us known, even though we were wide awake and going about the business of our lives, that we were in the middle of a dream, we could have saved ourselves a lot of subsequent hardship. The meal that I have just described, with the exquisite sauce and the tough meat, is what most people refer to as an omen or a sign, an event of unusual nature that tries to deliver a message. This kind of occurrence didn't only happen back in the days of the Roman Empire, with soothsayers interpreting the entrails of sheep. These kinds of events go on as readily today as they always have. In fact, I'm going to argue this afternoon that we are constantly being presented with omens in our waking lives, and that they are no different in character, purpose, or effect than the dreams we have at night while we are asleep. I call omens waking dreams because they are like dreams and they happen while we are wide awake. Further, I have found that an excellent way to reveal the messages they contain is to treat them exactly the same as if they were sleeping dreams, the more traditional kind of dream that we have when we are in a state of deep slumber. We know that dreams can offer insights into our states of consciousness, often delivering a message that suggests to us a shift in attitude or a beneficial course correction. The same is true of omens, waking dreams. However, what makes omens so unreliable as tools for personal growth is that individuals in general don't know what to do with them when these unusual occurrences come into their lives. People are often good at recognizing them, but then what? It's the interpretation of these events that causes the problem. Some people take delight in recognizing such unusual happenings, but then, just as delightedly, go on their merry way and ignore them. At the other extreme, there are those who jump to wild conclusions. That leaves the rest of us who for the most part are quietly perplexed by such incidents. Whenever I facilitate dream work, whether sleeping or waking dreams, I try to follow two important principles in regard to dream interpretation. The first principle: it has been my observation that dreams speak in a universal language, the language of metaphor. Take the most bizarre and disjointed set of events in the plot of a dream, isolate the symbols, and interpret them as metaphors, and suddenly the elusive, nonsensical nature of the dream evolves into a clear message. Second principle: dreams, no matter what their subject and message might be, are always about the dreamer. In more than 35 years of working with dreams, I have never known of an exception to that. Dreams can be about anything. They can describe a conflict or give a warning. They can be an expression of congratulation or be about past lives. They can act as the venue for lucid experiences during sleep. They can be a communication with beings from other realms or times. They can be prophetic. They can even be a vehicle for astral travel. But common to every one of them is that they are also about the dreamer. With those two principles in mind, that dreams speak in metaphors and that all parts of a dream are about the dreamer, I begin the process of helping a dreamer unravel the messages contained in dreams of any kind, including omens, waking dreams, by taking the dreamer through 5 simple steps. Number 1, relate the dream. Number 2, isolate the symbols. Number 3, interpret the symbols as metaphors. Number 4, retell the dream using and owning the metaphors. More about that in a little bit. Number 5, explore the dream's relevance in your life. I will now describe these 5 steps in greater detail. Step 1, relate the dream. In the case of my waking dream about coq au vin, the French dish I tried to eat with the uncharacteristically tough meat, I have already done that for you. I simply told you what happened on the evening of my dinner fiasco. Number 2, isolate the symbols. The coq au vin waking dream was short, and as I pondered it, I came up with 5 symbols. Symbols can be words, feelings, sensations, anything that left an impression on me as I thought about my experience. In this case, the 5 symbols were all things I was confronted with during my experience. My Belgian girlfriend, the meal, coq au vin, exquisite sauce, and unpalatable meat. Step 3, interpret the symbols as metaphors. This is the part of my interpretation technique that requires a little bit of practice, but dreamers usually get the hang of it quickly. In order to understand a symbol as a metaphor, I often ask my dreamers to pretend that I am only 5 years old, and then I ask them to tell me about each of the symbols. For example, I'm only 5 years old, and I don't understand very much about life yet. Please tell me about a Belgian girlfriend. Asking this question from the perspective of a 5-year-old will result in a very different type of answer than if I were to receive a response geared to an adult. It is the simplicity of the reply that is more likely to reveal the metaphor that I'm looking for. So in order to describe a Belgian girlfriend to a 5-year-old, the dreamer might give an answer. Dreamer might give an answer like, "This is a person who is very special to me, and I want to spend a lot of time with her. She's really nice. She makes yummy food, and one of the things I like most about her is that she speaks a different language than I do." In the same way, I'll now go through the other symbols in this waking dream. Remember that I'm giving answers to someone of kindergarten age. Tell me about a meal. It's what you take inside of yourself to stay alive, stay healthy, and give you energy. Tell me about coq au vin. This is a special kind of food from a place far away. Tell me about exquisite sauce. Sauce is like gravy. It's not the main part of what you eat, but it can help make things taste better. This sauce was really delicious. Tell me about unpalatable meat. Meat is the main part of what I eat, and this was really hard to chew. You almost couldn't eat it. At this point, we've accomplished 3 of the steps in the dream interpretation process. We've related the dream, we've isolated the symbols, and 3, we interpreted the symbols as metaphors. Now we're ready for step 4. Step 4, retell the dream using and owning the metaphors. This step is really similar to the first one, in which the dreamer simply related the dream. Only now, instead of saying the words that were symbols, like meal, we will substitute the explanations that the dreamer gave the 5-year-old. In the case of the symbol meal, the dreamer said, "It's what you eat to stay alive, stay healthy, and give you energy." To further remind the dreamer that the dream is about himself, to help him own the dream, there will be an additional change. A phrase will be repeatedly inserted into the story. A phrase like, "There is a part of me that." So, instead of retelling the story using the word meal, it will be retold by saying, "There is a part of me that consists of what I take inside myself to stay healthy, to stay alive, stay healthy, and give myself energy." This manner of retelling is the essence of step 4. We are pulling back from the actual dream, and instead of thinking of it in literal terms, we are thinking of it as a metaphoric message. Let me repeat the part of the dream that I just read, the part containing the symbol meal. As I do so, think metaphorically. There is a part of me that consists of what I take inside of myself to stay alive, stay healthy, and give myself energy. Before we retell the whole dream in this fashion, let's hear again the interpretations, the explanations the dreamer gave the 5-year-old when asked to talk about the dream symbols. Belgian girlfriend. This is a person who is very special to me, and I want to spend a lot of time with her. She's really nice. She makes yummy food, and one of the things I like most about her is that she speaks a different language than I do. Meal. It's what you take inside of yourself to stay alive, stay healthy, and give you energy. Coq au vin. This is a special kind of food from a place far away. Exquisite sauce. Sauce is like gravy. It's not the main part of what you eat, but it can help make things taste better. This sauce was really delicious. Tough meat. Meat is the main part of what I eat, and this was really hard to chew. You almost couldn't eat it. With this review of step 3, interpreting the symbols as metaphors, here is step 4, the dream itself now told metaphorically. So remember, as you listen, try to translate the images you hear described into metaphors. There is a part of me that is very special to me, and I want to spend a lot of time with it. This part of me is really nice. It makes yummy food, and one of the things I like the most about it is that it speaks a different language than I do. This part of myself is giving me a special kind of food from a place inside of myself that is far away. This food is what I will take inside of myself to stay alive, stay healthy, and give myself energy. Part of this food is the gravy. It's not the main part of what I take inside of myself, but it can make things taste better. And this part is really delicious. But the part that is the main part of what the part that is the main part is really hard to chew. You almost can't eat it. I just shared a waking dream, an omen, that has been interpreted exactly as if I were helping a dreamer work on a sleeping dream. The symbols have been analyzed as metaphors, and the dreamer, in this case me, has taken ownership and responsibility for them. Next comes step 5. Explore the dream's relevance in your life. Another way to express this step is simply to ask the question, what did I receive from this omen, this waking dream? How did this dream help me? Perhaps we can begin to observe that this dream contains a warning, one which can be seen on 2 levels. First, the more obvious of the levels is that this is a warning about the compatibility factor of a relationship. The sauce is exquisite, the meat is indigestible. Had the 2 of us heeded that warning, we might have maintained a more casual association that would not have led to the kind of volatility that marked the end of our relationship. The second level of warning is the more profound of the 2, for it is a cautionary message for me alone. Remember that dreams are primarily about the dreamer. Remove my Belgian girlfriend from consideration in the dream analysis, and the dream says something about a penchant I had as a young man for being attracted to things primarily because they were exotic, with a delicious sauce, but not necessarily because they were palatable to me. Indeed, that is a tendency I've had to cope with my whole life, not just as a young man. I become intrigued with things or ideas or people that seem new and different to me, and I will adopt them before I have taken the time to examine them substantively. Even as a young man, it seemed the universe, through a waking dream, was already trying to warn me about this trait. An extraordinary aspect to the experience with my Belgian girlfriend is that as long as I ignored the dream message, she remained in my life. This relationship went on for a long time, and her presence was a symbol of those exotic attractions I had that were counterproductive. But there came a moment, completely unrelated to my love affair, when I faced my unhealthy tendencies for the first time. I took the initial steps needed to bring change. And although I didn't make the connection right away, this new understanding coincided with the end of my Belgian love affair. I wasn't given just a single omen that came at one moment in time during a French meal, but rather my Belgian friend was present in my life as a constant metaphor, sometimes more dramatically, sometimes less dramatically, but always there, until I altered an attitude in myself that needed changing. At that point, I became a slightly different person, and the metaphor of my girlfriend was no longer apt. She then disappeared from my life. This experience, with its lesson learned, implies something extraordinary about the nature of life and the universe. It seems to say that on one level at least, things that come into our lives can be interpreted metaphorically as a facet of ourselves. That is true of sleeping dreams that we have at night, but it is equally true of waking life as we go about the more mundane affairs of our lives. The so-called objective waking world, in which there is a logical sequence of cause and effect in our daily lives, is only one part of our waking experience. Another part seems to be about metaphors. Communicating through metaphors is one way in which life seems to send us messages that are tailored specifically to our own states of consciousness. I have now worked in detail through 5 steps to interpret the metaphors of a waking dream. This method of working in detail through each of the symbols is vital because every dreamer will come up with metaphors that are uniquely his own. If I had asked everyone in this room to tell me about Belgian lovers, I suspect that many of the responses would have been significantly different than the one I gave. It's one way in which life sends us messages that are tailored specifically to our own states of consciousness. Sometimes the meanings of dream symbols from both waking and sleeping dreams are apparent, and their meaning can be generalized. The images from my dinner date with my Belgian girlfriend are a good example. A delectable sauce accompanying tough meat is a metaphoric image that is relatively easy to understand. But now let's analyze a second dream, one that includes a symbol not so easily generalized. This is a very short sleeping dream that was related during a dream class I taught several years ago. It contains a good example of a symbol that is individualized to the dreamer. We'll go through all 5 steps of the dream interpretation technique I use. Step 1, here is the way the dreamer herself told her dream. I'm out for a stroll. I come to a fork in the road and look at the path going to my left. Suddenly, I get the urge to eat some sushi. That's the dream. Since it's so short, let's repeat it. I'm out for a stroll. I come to a fork in the road and look at the path going to my left. Suddenly, I get the urge to eat some sushi. Step 2, isolate the symbols. The dreamer chose these symbols: stroll, fork in the road, path going to my left, suddenly, urge, eat, sushi. Step 3, interpret the symbols as metaphors. This is the tell me about it part, in which the dreamer tries to explain the symbol as simply as possible. In this case, the dreamer did not make an effort to explain the symbols to a 5-year-old, but she nevertheless gave uncomplicated, clear answers that had metaphors as their basis. As we go through this step, pay close attention to her lengthier explanation when she gets to the symbol path going to my left. Tell me about stroll, going leisurely from one place to another. Tell me about fork in the road. I have to make a choice. Tell me about path going to my left. My parents came from Italy, and in Italian the word for left also means sinister. I found that definition intriguing growing up in the United States, though it never had that strong an association for me. But I guess I do have the sense that the left path being the forbidden fruit, the mysterious, taboo direction. Tell me about suddenly, unexpectedly. Tell me about urge, strong desire. Tell me about eat, take in nourishment. Tell me about sushi. It's a food that is foreign to my culture, but one which I have learned to enjoy. Step 4, relate the dream using and owning the metaphors. Now we relate the dream again, substituting the dreamer's explanations for the symbols and sprinkling the narrative with the phrase, "There is a part of me." As you listen, think metaphorically. There is a part of me that is leisurely going from one place inside myself to another. This part of me comes to a fork, a spot where I have to make a choice. I look in the direction of things that I have always considered mysterious and taboo for myself, like forbidden fruit. But unexpectedly, there is a part of me that has a strong desire to take in nourishment that was initially foreign to me, but which I have learned to enjoy. Aren't dreams amazing? Suddenly, a clearly elucidated logical storyline emerged, all from the unlikely combination of forks in the road and sushi. Now it was time for step 5. Explore the dream's relevance in your life. In our subsequent discussion, this dreamer explained that she had felt stuck in a rut, always doing things that were predictable. She felt that through this dream she was giving herself permission, in fact, urging herself to explore new avenues in her life. Note the extent to which the dreamer's interpretation of her sushi dream was unique to herself. I wonder how many of us in this room would have come up with her explanation for path going to my left. I suspect not many of us. The word left can have so many meanings. It can mean abandoned. It can refer to a political leaning. It can imply something that remains, like leftovers. It can mean having taken off on a journey. And yes, the archaic Western European meaning for the word left is evil. Examples like this one are good reminders to all of us working with dreams of how important it is not to superimpose a rigid system of symbol interpretation on a dreamer. This was an example of a sleeping dream. These images came to the dreamer at night when she was in bed and fast asleep. The example I gave earlier of my dinner engagement with my Belgian girlfriend was a waking dream. It took place in the evening while both of us were wide awake and fully conscious. Yet both experiences, the sleeping dream and the waking dream, when interpreted metaphorically, had important things to say to the dreamer. In the sleeping dream, the dreamer had a message to deliver to herself, so she invented metaphoric images from her subconscious and brought them into her conscious awareness so she could interpret them and grow from an understanding of the suggestion they were making to her. All the imagery came from her imagination. But what about the imagery in my waking dream? Where did that come from? The real-life images of a delectable sauce accompanying tough meat presented me with a succinct, clear message, namely, to be cautious of leaping into new, exotic experiences without examining them first. Was the appearance of those images in my life a coincidence? Conversely, did I somehow create this intolerably tough chicken as if it were a figment of my imagination? In more than 35 years of working with waking dreams, I long ago stopped trying to pretend that these incidents are coincidental. I do not fully understand how it works, but I know that somehow life in the real world becomes involved in the waking dream creation process. In some way, the universe presented me with a series of images that was bizarre enough that I paid special attention to it. Never before or since have I tried to eat a chicken that was so tough it was almost unchewable. I took note of that imagery, analyzing it as I went through 5 steps of a simple interpretation method. That led me to examine my attitudes and behaviors about exotic experiences in my life. When I did, another extraordinary phenomenon took place. My Belgian girlfriend, so long a conflicted element of my life, left. It seems that images, both sleeping and waking, go away of their own accord when they have served their purpose. One might have thought that my girlfriend's departure would have coincided with a more formal verbal termination of our relationship, or maybe a good fight. But our love affair did not end that way. She just left without a word. On one level, she was a companion in real life, and the two of us went about the business of living together in typical fashion. But on another level, she was a consistent, abrasive symbol in my daily affairs as long as I paid no attention to the message this waking dream was trying to deliver to me. When I finally confronted the issue it was trying so hard to address, namely my penchant for launching headlong into exotic situations without examining them first, my Belgian girlfriend went out of my life exactly the same way a symbol in a sleeping dream comes and goes with no logical sequence of events. In sleeping dreams, we are accustomed to the seemingly random appearance and disappearance of symbols. In the sleeping dream I related about Sushi, for example, when the dreamer dreamt about taking the left path, she then acted on the dream's suggestion, made an attitude shift, and when she did, this particular sleeping dream had done its job. It vanished from her life. There seems to be a metaphoric overlay to the structure of our lives that is asking us to live in a paradox. On one level, we need to live life logically and objectively, eat, go to work, pay our bills. But on another level, it seems that we are being asked to understand life as a dream. It is through this dreaming process, both sleeping and waking, that the nudges for our growth take place. We have all heard the adages, especially from Eastern philosophical teachings. You create your own universe. Life is what you make it. You are responsible for everything that comes into your awareness. You manifest your own reality. How does that work? If I'm responsible for the things that come into my awareness, how did I put them there? And perhaps more to the point, if I don't like what's in my life, how do I eliminate it? While I cannot answer every one of those questions with any degree of assurance, I submit that one way to take control, understand and lessen life's problems and conflicts, is through the careful observation and interpretation of important dreams, both sleeping dreams and waking dreams. I have suggested that acting on a dream message by changing our attitudes or behavior patterns causes unpleasant symbols to disappear. Further, I have argued that this is as valid during waking life as it is in sleep. If all that is true, then dealing with life metaphorically as if it were a dream, not objectively, holds an important key to resolving problems in our lives. But how do you determine which dreams are important and which aren't? Dreams that leave the greatest impression on us are certainly among the most important. With sleeping dreams, that's a relatively easy determination to make. Many of us only remember a few of the nearly countless dreams we have over a lifetime, and the ones we recall tend to be important. With waking dreams, it's a bit more complicated because we are fully aware and have the capability of remembering everything that happens to us throughout the day. Over the years, I have identified 3 categories of waking dreams that warrant examination and interpretation. 1, a waking dream that is shocking, like a near miss with an automobile that leaves you shaking. 2, a waking dream consisting of a bizarre or highly unusual event, like cooking a dish of coq au vin with a chicken that is so tough it can't be eaten. 3, a waking dream with a repeating symbol, like a computer glitch that seems to keep coming back despite repeated calls to the service technician. Think about these 3 categories of significant waking dreams. Do you have an unpleasant situation in your life that is shocking or bizarre or occurs repeatedly and doesn't seem to go away? Rather than confronting this kind of situation as a nuisance or a crisis, have you ever tried dealing with it as a metaphor? I suggest thinking of it as a message that wants to be interpreted and understood, then acted upon. Deal with it as if it were a dream, a waking dream. Go through the 5 steps of interpretation. Relate the dream, isolate the symbols, interpret the symbols as metaphors, retell the dream using and owning the metaphors, explore the dream's relevance in your life. You may be surprised at what you can learn about yourself. In summary, I have focused more on the waking dream than the sleeping dream in this talk. However, I feel that both types of dreams are equally important. Depending on the dreamer, some will find working with one easier than working with the other type. But understanding the message of any dream, waking or sleeping, reveals its purpose for being in our lives. Once the lesson is learned, the dream has fulfilled its mission, and it quietly passes out of our awareness. In my role as a facilitator of dreams, I have seen this entire sequence of events occur many times. I've become convinced that a large part of what we are supposed to be accomplishing in this physical plane has to do with understanding life metaphorically, as if it were a dream, not literally. I highly recommend experimenting with the steps I've outlined. Whether you work primarily with sleeping dreams or waking dreams, when you understand them metaphorically, you may find yourself stumbling your way into one of the big secrets of existence. It may just change your life. Thank you. So we have about 20 minutes, which is what I was hoping to have, so we can talk if you want, or if you don't want to talk and ask questions in dialogue, then I am happy to keep talking up here. Are there questions or people, or maybe here's one over here, and as people are thinking, I can certainly keep talking away.
Thank you so much. I'm a nurse, and I work with a doctor that explained to me that you can remember your dreams if there's a good level of B6 in your bloodstream. Have you heard that?
Yes, there are actually several kinds of supplements that you can take, and B6 is one of them. But what I tell people who have a hard time remembering their dreams, and if you want to take B6, I can tell you a story about taking niacin that just reminded me. That's very funny. I didn't realize the effects it would have on me, but which was also a very interesting waking dream for me. But what I tell people usually who have a difficult time remembering their dreams at night is you have no excuse anymore. If you can't remember your dreams at night, you most certainly can remember the metaphoric images that are going on during the day. We all have them. And it's the bottom line of any of those kinds of the three kinds that I was talking about, is that the experience stays with you. Now, let's say you have a confrontation with a colleague at work, and they've been friends for years, and you can't understand why all of a sudden, you had this spat. And you say, well, it was just one of those things, and you let it go. But then after lunch, it's still churning in there, and then the next morning, it's still churning in there. When you have that churning experience, that's an important dream to take care of, to take a look at, and those things happen when we're awake. So if you have less dream recall from your sleeping dreams than you used to have, or maybe never had, maybe never paid any attention to it, turn your attention to what's going on during your waking life. And I'll give you, one of the things I love about dreams is that dreams appeal to such a broad spectrum of the culture. I think one of my mandates as I work with dreams is to work with people who are not quite ready to sit in a room like this at a conference like this. They're almost ready to awaken but aren't quite yet. But if you hand them something concrete like dream symbols, and you can show them a logical method of analyzing a dream, they have something to grab onto, and that tends to lessen their resistance to something like a spiritual experience that they may find threatening at first. And yet, the more experienced we are, that does not lessen the experience, the importance of the metaphor in our understanding of how life works. Remember Blair's talk last night. And when he was going around the room, sometimes really honing in on people in a way that was reading them to their core, almost a little uncomfortably in some cases, although always with tremendous humor. He didn't really need to use metaphors at all, and yet if you watched and listened very carefully, he did. He was using metaphors. Remember when he was working the crowd in between the tables, it was quite narrow, and the toe of his shoe accidentally stumbled on a purse that someone had very discreetly left under the table. And he said, "So you're carrying a lot of baggage around?" And by the way, that was not meant in any way to single out an individual. It was a message to all of us sitting in the room. But then I thought, oh, okay, well, so even this guy's working with the waking dream. And then later on, here we are in Arkansas in July, and it's well into the 90s, and so they have the air conditioning cranked way up, and people are sitting there just freezing to death. And there was one lady sitting in the front who had not only put on a sweater, but had herself wrapped in the sweater. And he goes up to her and he says, "So how's that straitjacket you got on there?" Again, this is working with a metaphor. Nobody had a real straitjacket, and nobody had a suitcase with baggage in it. He was using it. He didn't have to say, "Okay, well, I'm a 5-year-old. Tell me what a purse means." He was well beyond that. And yet this is how you start. Using these techniques is where you start thinking about life in this way. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. Oh yeah, back there.
Thank you. When you're talking about seeing symbols in your daily life, what part do numbers play? I went through a period of time where I was seeing a certain number over and over, far more often than would be considered normal.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be really unwise of me to say, "Oh, well, the number 8 means," that. So let me talk a little bit about symbols and how they work. I helped somebody with a dream here yesterday that the main symbol in it was an anaconda. This was a sleeping dream, and this was a repeating nightmare that this individual had had over a period of years. And so we started talking about the whole idea of trying to pull a dream symbol out of a hat for this guy. And we said, okay, well, let's see. We can go back to Greek times in the earliest stages of medicine. And if you've ever seen the Greek symbol of the Hippocratic Oath, which has 2 entwined snakes on it, and that's because they used to take the venom and make a serum out of it, which was for healing. So there's the symbol of a snake as a healing source. Then you can scoot forward a couple thousand years to Benjamin Franklin when we were first starting to make this country, and they needed a flag, right? Benjamin Franklin designed the first flag, which had a snake in it that said, "Don't tread on me." So there is the snake as a patriotic symbol. Now you can scoot forward just about 100 years to Sigmund Freud, and who said, well, obviously, snakes are a symbol of sex. And so here are all of these various thinking processes that someone has found important in their own lives. And what turned out in this particular individual's dream, it had nothing to do with any of those things. It was a metaphor that he invented from his own psyche, and with a communication that was going on from the source to him and himself alone. So that's a long way around to answering your question, which is, well, what does this certain number mean? See me afterwards, and we'll go through the process. We'll go through the 5 steps. You know what that means, and I don't. And if I were to try to superimpose, 25 obviously means, and and don't get me wrong, there are certain archetypical meanings to certain numbers. The 3, the 9, the 27, all the multiples of 3 can have pretty consistent meanings from one dreamer to the next. But so can the dream symbol of the mother. There's an archetypical dream symbol, mother. That's the entity that gives us life. So we all have mothers. If I were to ask every single individual in this room, tell me about your mother, we know we would have, 100 different variations of the same symbol, so that it is on one level archetypical. On one level it's totally universal, and yet everyone is colored by our own individual experiences. And that's why it's so important to let the dreamer give the symbol. The dreamer is really the only one who knows. Lots of people. Yeah.
What about daydreaming? Because daydreaming falls in between, because you kind of can tell what you kind of want, and you have a lot more input in that one, but it's still kind of a dream. Would you use the same process for a daydream?
Exactly the same process, yeah. What you're doing is, when you are dreaming, is you're letting your mind wander. And so what your mind does is it creates all these images, and they're all metaphoric. So you can, if you were to come to me with, well, I was supposed to be, working on this deadline that I had for Friday, and suddenly I was off, and there were these peach trees, and, I was eating this delicious fruit, or whatever, I would simply treat that exactly as any other kind of dream. It's an image, it's a metaphor, it's a sense of it. And it's not a coincidence that it happened when you had an hour left to fulfill your deadline on Friday afternoon. There was a reason for it being there. Yeah.
I had what I considered an omen yesterday during the day here. And my question about it was a very short thing, but my question really to you about it is that 3 of the same things happened. So, I saw 3 different butterflies in addition to a dead one. So the fact that I saw those 3, does that mean anything that they were repeating?
Oh, sure. If you have, remember the three important types of dreams I talked about. One was the shocking dream, the other one was the bizarre dream, and then the third one was a dream with a repeating symbol. And anytime you have a repetition, I did help someone with a dream here just yesterday where it was about shirts. They kept seeing shirts lying in the road. And this, how often do you drive along and you see a shirt lying in the road? It fulfilled 2 of the 3 categories. One was it was bizarre, and then the second one was that the symbol repeated. And so yes, the answer is the fact that it repeated was something that it wants you to look more carefully at it.
Okay, because I could rather understand it, but it was the repeating that I had. So you think that's just, I need to pay more attention to it?
Yeah, it's trying to talk to you, and let me expand on that a little bit. And this goes back to a little bit what Julia has written in her book too, which is these dream symbols start off very gently, like butterflies, and they're trying to communicate, and you don't pay attention. Oh, isn't that sweet, a little butterfly? Okay. They didn't hear me, so let me hit them a little harder. Right. So then the next time it comes around, it might not be butterflies, it might be wasps, and so, oh my gosh, bees, and they're just all over the place, and isn't that annoying? And so we ignore that. Okay, well, so it's time to bring out the 2x4. And we've all had the experience of being clobbered, right? That's part of the spiritual growth process. If it keeps going and we don't pay attention to it, ultimately what it does is it manifests in our physical bodies, first as acute illness, and I don't mean like, oh, how sweet, cute, I mean that it flares up all of a sudden and then goes away. But if we still don't pay attention, then ultimately it becomes chronic illness. And that's when it's really hard. It becomes much more difficult in this lifetime.
That makes sense, because now I'm at the point where I better write it down.
Yeah.
Even though the first butterfly I understood, oh yeah, that's probably it, but now I'm at the point where, I guess I'll write it down.
Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, pay attention. Yeah, and it's gentle at this point. So, and if you want some help, I'm happy to help.
Oh, thank you.
So, and by the way, if anybody's interested in this, on Monday I'm doing a workshop where everybody gets to participate and actually do the things that I was talking about. Let's see how my time is. Okay, I've a little more time left. Anybody have more questions? Or back there's some.
I was just curious. I know, I've kind of helped my kids on and off interpret their nighttime dreams, and I try to, kind of like the way you talked about it, make it personal to them. Are there ever cases where there's messages for others, or even a collective type of message? Because I know my sister-in-law said she had a dream about 9/11 before it happened, and I've read accounts where other people have, so I just was wondering if you could touch on that a little.
Sure, and that actually covers quite a bit of territory. So let me start with, again, I was helping someone else yesterday with a dream where they had several in a row nighttime sleeping dreams of an automobile accident, and then exactly as it was described in the nighttime dream, this happened. Ended up with the car off in the woods and lay in the woods overnight with nobody finding her until the next day. So there are two ways to look at that. Wow, did she have a prophetic dream? Well, in one sense, yes, she did. But one thing I like to tell people who have prophetic experiences is, well, maybe if you'd paid attention to the sleeping dream, it wouldn't have had to hit you harder in the waking state. And that's something that's a whole different concept of how our own attitude toward dreams. That people who have prophetic experiences, and they are very important, don't get me wrong, but I have worked with people whose prophetic experiences were inconsistent, and they found them aggravating because they could never tell when they were really going to come true or not. And so I said, well, let's try an experiment. Every time you have what you think is a prophetic sleeping dream, let's go through the 5 steps and see if it comes true in physical real life. And it doesn't. That tells you something really important about the process of dreaming and what it's about. That actually these are messages for herself. And even if they were prophetic and they were going to go out into the world, ultimately, we have that much control over what we manifest in our lives if we can take a look at the metaphors. So that's part of the answer to your question, but the other part is, yes, absolutely, dreams are not only about us, they are about everything in our consciousness, right? Remember I talked about waking dreams, that these things manifest in our lives because they describe ourselves to ourselves through metaphor. So if your kids are having dreams in which, or someone in your family has a dream that seems to be about someone else in the family, it's because they are metaphoric symbols for each other. And those things, interrelate in extraordinary ways. I mean, the talk just before mine with Guy, where he talked about the various ways in which souls incarnate. And this is another example of that, this blending of so many different ways. And that is expressed through dreams as well as any other method. Any other questions? There's one up here.
Since we're well into New Earth right now, I'm wondering, you've been doing this for many years, and how have the dreams that you're told changed?
That's really interesting. I'm not sure the dreams themselves have changed so much, but what I am seeing a lot this weekend. Let me back up just a little bit. Catherine and Patrick are working on this whole new concept of a new curriculum for schools and creating a new school where kids can just be themselves. I mean, it's such a fantastic concept. Much more difficult to teach rather than, putting all kids in one-size-fits-all category. What I'm seeing in the dreams now are all those people who are now adults, who are now trying to evolve into who they really are, who were put in one-size-fits-all. And what they're doing now is they're trying to clean all that out. There's a lot of that going on, old fears, old messages from mom and dad or from the church or from society. I get a lot of that. And people come to me with these tremendous fears, oh my gosh, my world is falling apart in this dream, whether it's a waking dream, sometimes it is a waking dream and the world in their lives literally is falling apart. Sometimes it's that they've had a nightmare in a sleeping dream, and in that arena the world seemed to be falling apart. And I say, how great. And they're always a little shocked because, you're trying to hold it all together. And we start working on the symbols, and what becomes apparent is the things that are falling apart are all these old messages. And they are cleaning themselves out. And it's always a little disconcerting when we have to try to evolve from step A to step B. That always freaks every one of us out, myself included, for sure. All right, well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.